who covered car repairs without asking for repayment, who sent grocery money every month like clockwork. I paid for things that should have never been my responsibility, and I did it with a smile because I thought that was what family meant. My brother Andrew was different. Andrew was the golden child, the one my parents spoke about with pride at every family gathering. Andrew was 35, 3 years younger than me, but you would never know it from the way my parents treated him. When Andrew graduated college, my parents threw him a massive party at a rented hall. When I graduated, we had cake at the kitchen table. When Andrew bought his first car, my father personally co-signed the loan and bragged about it for months. When I bought my first car, I paid cash because no one offered to help. Andrew lived in a nice apartment downtown, drove a newer model sedan, and posted vacation photos every few months. What my parents never mentioned was who funded that lifestyle. I did. For the past decade, I had been wiring Andrew money almost every month. Sometimes it was rent, sometimes it was utilities, sometimes it was just because he asked, and my parents said I should help my brother. They never asked if I could afford it. They never asked if I minded. They simply expected it, and I delivered. That was how our family worked. Andrew lived like he had no financial worries, and I made sure those worries never reached him. My parents praised his independence while quietly reminding me to send the next payment on time. I had a daughter. Her name was Sophie, and she was 6 years old. Sophie had a heart condition that required surgery within the next year. The procedure was expensive, even with insurance, and I had been saving for it since the day she was diagnosed. Every paycheck, I set aside a fixed amount into a separate account. That account was labeled Hospital Fund in my banking app. It was not for vacations. It was not for emergencies that were not truly emergencies. It was for Sophie and only Sophie. My ex-wife and I shared custody, and we had agreed that I would handle the medical savings while she managed the day-to-day expenses. It was a clear arrangement, and I took it seriously. My parents knew about Sophie's condition. They knew about the surgery. They knew I was saving, but they also knew I never made a scene when they asked for money, so they kept asking. My father would call me at odd hours, his voice calm but insistent, explaining that Andrew needed help again. My mother would text me screenshots of overdue bills, adding a single line at the end. "Can you handle this?" I always said yes. I always transferred the money. I always told myself it was temporary, that Andrew would eventually stand on his own, that my parents would eventually stop asking. I was wrong. 3 months ago, Andrew got behind on rent. He owed 2 months and his landlord had sent an eviction notice. My father called me immediately, his tone urgent but not panicked. Andrew was going through a rough patch. The landlord was being unreasonable. Family helped family. I listened to the entire speech, already knowing where it was heading. My father did not ask if I had the money. He simply told me the amount and said he would forward me the landlord's payment details. I sent the money that same night. Andrew never called to thank me. My father sent a brief text. "Got it. Thanks." That was 3 months ago. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Andrew would catch up and the cycle would pause. I thought I had bought him time to fix his situation. I did not realize I had only delayed the inevitable. I did not realize my father had been watching my accounts, tracking my savings, and making plans I knew nothing about. I did not realize that my silence had been mistaken for permission. I should have seen it coming. The betrayal came on a Thursday afternoon. I had stopped by my father's house to drop off some paperwork he had asked for, something related to taxes. It was a quick visit, nothing unusual. I parked in the driveway, walked up the porch steps, and knocked twice before he opened the door. He looked relaxed, almost too relaxed, like someone who had just finished a task they had been putting off for weeks. He smiled at me, gestured for me to come inside, but I stayed on the porch. I told him I had somewhere to be, which was not entirely true, but I was not in the mood for small talk. He did not seem bothered. Instead, he reached behind the door and pulled out a folder. It was one of those plain manila folders, the kind you buy in bulk at office supply stores. He handed it to me without ceremony, his expression neutral. "I used your daughter's hospital savings to cover Andrew's overdue rent." I froze. The folder felt heavier than it should have. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to clarify that he was joking or that I had misunderstood. But he did not clarify anything. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at me like he had just told me he had picked up milk from the store. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, bank statements, transfer confirmations, withdrawal records. Everything was organized, dated, highlighted in yellow marker. My father had pulled $8,000 from my hospital savings account and sent it directly to Andrew's landlord. The transfer had happened 2 days ago. I had not noticed because I rarely checked that account. It was supposed to be untouchable. It was supposed to be protected. It was supposed to be for Sophie. Andrew was going to lose his apartment. The landlord was serious this time. I did not want to bother you with phone calls, so I just handled it. You have been saving for a while. You can rebuild it. Andrew needed it now. I looked up from the folder. My father was not apologetic. He was not even uncomfortable. He was explaining the situation like it was a solved problem, like I should be relieved he had taken care of it without involving me. He genuinely believed he had done me a favor. I closed the folder. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I wanted to yell. I wanted to ask him how he got access to an account that was not his. I wanted to demand an explanation for why he thought my daughter's medical fund was fair game for my brother's rent. But I did not do any of that. I just smiled. If you think so. My father blinked, clearly not expecting that response. He tilted his head slightly like he was trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic or genuine. I did not give him time to ask. I turned and walked back to my car, the folder still in my hand. I heard him call after me, something about talking it through. But I did not stop. I got into my car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and drove away. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain why what he had done was wrong. I simply smiled and left. My father probably thought I was fine with it. He probably thought my silence meant acceptance. He probably thought he could do it again if Andrew needed more help. He was wrong. I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the sound of my tires on the pavement and my thoughts running through what I had just learned. My father had somehow gained access to my account. He had transferred $8,000 without asking. He had justified it by saying Andrew needed it more. He had handed me proof of his actions like it was a receipt for a shared meal. He had done all of this and expected me to nod and move on. I had spent years being the dependable son, the one who never complained, the one who always helped. I had thought that loyalty would be respected. I had thought my boundaries would be obvious. I had thought wrong. My father had just taught me a lesson I would never forget. Family did not mean what I thought it meant, not to them, and I was done pretending it did. I did not call anyone that night. I did not vent to friends. I did not text my ex-wife about what had happened. I just sat in my apartment, the folder open on my kitchen table, staring at the highlighted numbers like they would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. They did not. The $8,000 was gone. My father had taken it. Andrew had it now. Facing consequences. I thought about calling my father back. I thought about driving over there and demanding an explanation that made sense. I thought about confronting Andrew and asking him if he even knew where the money had come from. But I did not do any of those things. I just sat there, replaying the moment on the porch, hearing my father's voice say the words again and again. I used your daughter's hospital savings to cover Andrew's overdue rent. He had said it so casually, like it was a minor administrative detail, like it was already resolved and not worth discussing further. The worst part was not the money. The worst part was the assumption. My father had assumed I would be fine with it. He had assumed my savings were communal property. He had assumed that because I had always helped before, I would always help again, even if it meant sacrificing something that was never supposed to be on the table. He had assumed my silence meant permission. And maybe it did. Maybe I had trained them to think that way. Maybe I had spent so many years saying yes that they forgot I was allowed to say no. I went to bed that night but did not sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every time I had transferred money without question, every time I had covered Andrew's bills, every time my parents had called me dependable and never called me anything else. I thought about Sophie, about the surgery she needed, about the fund I had built specifically for her. I thought about how long it had taken me to save $8,000. I thought about how quickly my father had given it away. By morning, I had made a decision. I was not going to argue. I was not going to beg for the money back. I was not going to explain why what they had done was wrong. They already knew. They just did not care. So I decided to stop caring too. I decided to stop being the person they called when they needed money. I decided to stop being dependable. I decided to become something else entirely. I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. I logged into my banking app and started reviewing my accounts. The hospital fund was nearly empty now, just a few $100s left. But I had other accounts. I had a checking account my parents did not know about. I had a savings account under a different bank. I had protections I had set up years ago, back when I first started saving for Sophie, protections I had never needed to use until now. Protections my father clearly did not know existed. I pulled up the transaction history for the hospital fund. The withdrawal was there, dated 2 days ago, transferred to an account I did not recognize. My father must have added himself as an authorized user at some point, probably years ago, back when I was younger and more trusting. He had been sitting on that access, waiting for a moment when he thought he could use it without consequences. He thought wrong. I opened a separate tab and started making calls. The favoritism started when we were kids. I was 8, Andrew was 5. Our parents had always been clear about their expectations. I was the responsible one. Andrew was the one they protected. I was supposed to set an example. Andrew was supposed to be happy. It was never said out loud, but it was always understood. When we both wanted the same toy, Andrew got it. When we both needed help with homework, I was told to figure it out myself while my mother sat with Andrew. When report cards came home, my good grades were expected. Andrew's average grades were celebrated. I did not mind at first. I thought that was normal. I thought older siblings were supposed to carry more weight. But as we got older, the pattern became harder to ignore. When I turned 16, I asked for driving lessons. My father said I could learn on my own time. When Andrew turned 16, my father personally taught him and then helped him buy a car. I saved for 2 years to afford my first car. Andrew got his handed to him. When I graduated high school, my parents attended the ceremony but left early. When Andrew graduated, they threw a party and invited half the neighborhood. By the time I was in my 20s, the dynamic was set. I was the one who worked full-time and paid rent. Andrew was the one who bounced between jobs and borrowed money. I was the one who never asked for help. Andrew was the one who always needed it. My parents praised me for being independent, but they never stopped helping Andrew. They just expected me to help him too. And I did. I sent him money when he was short. I co-signed leases he could not afford. I covered bills he forgot to pay. I did it because my parents asked, and I did not know how to say no. At some point, I stopped being a brother and became a safety net. Andrew never thanked me. He never acknowledged the money I sent. He just took it and moved on, like it was owed to him, like I was obligated to keep him afloat. My parents never questioned it either. They just kept asking, and I kept giving, and the cycle continued for over a decade. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself Andrew would eventually grow up. I told myself my parents would eventually see the imbalance. But none of that happened. When Sophie was born, I thought things might change. I thought becoming a father would shift my priorities, would give me a reason to say no, would force my family to respect my boundaries. It did not. My parents met Sophie once, smiled politely, and then went back to talking about Andrew. When I told them about her heart condition, they said they were sorry and then asked if I could still send Andrew's rent that month. I said yes. I always said yes. I thought about that pattern now, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I thought about all the times I had prioritized their needs over my own. I thought about all the times I had been called dependable and never been called anything else. I thought about the $8,000 my father had taken, the $8,000 that was supposed to protect my daughter, the $8,000 that was now keeping Andrew comfortable in an apartment he could not afford. I thought about all of it, and I realized something. My family did not see me as a person. They saw me as a resource, and resources did not have feelings. Resources did not have boundaries. Resources just gave until there was nothing left. I was done being a resource. The first thing I did was call my bank. I explained the situation calmly, clearly, without emotion. An unauthorized withdrawal had been made from my account by someone who had access they should not have had. The account was designated for medical expenses, and the funds needed to be protected going forward. The representative asked if I wanted to file a fraud claim. I did. She asked if I knew who had made the withdrawal. I had my suspicions. She said that was enough. The process took less than 20 minutes. I provided transaction details, confirmed my identity, and authorized the bank to investigate. The representative explained that if the transfer was found to be unauthorized, the funds would be reversed and returned to my account within 48 hours. She also recommended that I remove any additional authorized users and set up enhanced security features to prevent future incidents. I agreed to all of it. I removed my father's access immediately. I added two-factor authentication. I changed my account passwords. I made sure no one could touch that money again without going through me first. The representative asked if I wanted to close the investigation quickly or let it proceed through standard channels. I told her to proceed. The bank would contact all involved parties, including the recipient of the funds, to verify the transaction. That was fine. She thanked me for calling and said I would receive email updates as the case progressed. I hung up, opened my email, and waited. The confirmation arrived within an hour. The fraud claim had been opened. The investigation was underway. The funds were frozen pending review. I read the email twice just to make sure I understood it correctly. The $8,000 my father had taken was now locked. Andrew's landlord could not access it. My father could not move it. No one could touch it until the bank decided who it belonged to. And the bank was going to side with me because I was the account holder, and the withdrawal had happened without my explicit consent. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction. My father had thought he was being clever. He had thought he could quietly move money around, and I would never notice or never care. He had thought wrong. I had protections in place. I had legal standing. I had a paper trail that proved assuredly account was mine and mine alone. He had made a critical mistake. He had assumed I was the same person I had been 10 years ago, the person who never questioned, the person who always complied. But I was not that person anymore. I thought about calling my father and telling him what I had done. I thought about explaining that the money was frozen, that the transfer was being reversed, that his plan had failed. But I did not. I wanted him to find out the same way he had told me about the withdrawal, casually, suddenly, without warning. I wanted him to feel the same shock I had felt when he handed me that folder. I wanted him to realize that silence did not mean acceptance. It meant calculation. I checked the time. It was early afternoon. The bank had said they would contact all involved parties within 24 hours. That meant my father would probably get a call tomorrow. Andrew's landlord would get one too. They would both learn that the transfer was under investigation and that the funds were being held. My father would panic. Andrew would panic, and I would watch it all unfold from a distance, calm and unbothered, exactly the way they had treated me for years. I closed my laptop. I poured another cup of coffee. I sat on my couch and waited for the phone to ring. I did not have to wait long. The call came the next evening, exactly 40 minutes after I had finished dinner. I was at my father's house. I had driven over without announcing my visit, parked in the driveway, and walked inside like I had done 100 times before. My father was in the living room, watching television with my mother. He looked surprised to see me, but not concerned. He greeted me casually, asked if I wanted something to drink, acted like nothing had changed. I declined. I just sat down in the chair across from him and waited. We made small talk for a few minutes. My mother asked about Sophie. I gave short answers. My father mentioned Andrew, said he was doing better now that his rent was handled. I nodded. I did not argue. I did not correct him. I just sat there, calm and patient, waiting for the moment I knew was coming. My father glanced at me a few times like he was trying to figure out why I was there. But he did not ask. He just kept talking, filling the silence with words that meant nothing. Then his phone rang. It was sitting on the coffee table between us, screen facing up. The caller ID said unknown number. My father picked it up, frowned slightly, and answered. "Hello," his usual voice, the one he used for strangers or telemarketers. but his expression changed within seconds. His frown deepened. His posture stiffened. He stood up, walked toward the kitchen, and said something I could not hear clearly. My mother looked at me confused. I just shrugged and kept my face neutral. My father stayed in the kitchen for several minutes. I could hear his voice rising and falling, sharp and defensive, then quiet and confused. He was asking questions. He was repeating phrases. He was trying to understand something he did not want to accept. My mother turned the television down and asked me if I knew what was happening. I did not. That was not entirely true, but it was close enough. When my father finally came back into the living room, his face was pale. He stood in the doorway, phone still in his hand, staring at me like I had just pulled a knife. He did not sit down. He just stood there, frozen, his mouth slightly open, his eyes locked on mine. My mother asked him what was wrong. He did not answer her. He just kept staring at me. I tilted my head slightly, keeping my expression calm. Something wrong? He blinked. He looked down at his phone, then back at me. His voice came out quieter than usual, almost uncertain. The bank just called. They said the transfer was unauthorized. They said it's being reversed. I did not react. I just nodded slowly, like I was processing information I had just learned. My father took a step closer, his voice gaining strength. They said someone filed a fraud claim. They said the money is going back to your account. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. Is that so? My father's face shifted. Confusion turned to realization. Realization turned to anger. He pointed at me, his hands shaking slightly. You did this. You called them. You told them I stole from you. I did not confirm or deny. I just sat there, calm and still, watching him piece it together. My mother stood up, her voice rising. Marcus, what is he talking about? Why would the bank call him? I turned to her, my voice even. Because he took money from an account that was not his. The bank does not like that. My father stepped forward, his anger fully surfaced now. That money was going to Andrew. He needed it. You know he needed it. You have been helping him for years. Why would you stop now? I stood up, slowly, deliberately. I looked my father in the eyes. Because you took money meant for my daughter's surgery. You did not ask. You did not explain. You just took it. And now the bank is taking it back. My father opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, we heard it. The sound of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the living room wall. Someone was pulling into the driveway. We all turned toward the window. My mother pulled the curtain back slightly. Her face went pale. It's Andrew. Andrew's car door slammed shut with a force that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. He stormed up the driveway, his face red, his movements sharp and aggressive. He did not knock. He just walked straight into the house, pushing the front door open so hard it bounced off the wall. He stopped in the middle of the living room, chest heaving, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. He pointed, his voice loud and raw. What did you do? I did not move. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, calm. My father stepped between us, his voice urgent. Andrew, calm down, let me explain. Andrew ignored him. He kept his eyes on me, his voice rising. The landlord just called. He said the payment bounced. He said the bank reversed it. He said I still owe 2 months of rent, and now I am getting evicted next week. I nodded slowly like I was hearing this for the first time. That sounds unfortunate. Andrew lunged forward, but my father caught his arm. My mother was standing near the hallway, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide. Andrew shook my father off and jabbed his finger toward me again. You filed a fraud claim. You told the bank Dad stole from you. You got the money reversed. Do you have any idea what you just did to me? I tilted my head slightly, my voice still calm. I got my daughter's hospital money back. That is what I did. Andrew's face twisted. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something colder, sharper. Sophie's surgery is not for another 6 months. I needed that money now. You could have rebuilt it. You always rebuild it. Why are you being like this? I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I spoke, my voice steady and clear. Because that money was never yours. It was never Dad's. It was Sophie's. And you do not get to decide what I can rebuild. Andrew looked at my father, his voice desperate now. You said he would be fine with it. You said he always helps. You said this was handled." My father did not respond. He just stood there, his face ashen, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. Andrew turned back to me, his voice cracking slightly. "I am going to lose my apartment. Do you understand that? I am going to be homeless because you decided to be selfish for the first time in your life." I let that word hang in the air. Selfish. He had called me selfish for protecting my daughter's medical fund. He had called me selfish for refusing to subsidize his inability to pay rent. He had called me selfish for stopping a theft. I felt something shift inside me, something cold and final. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, my voice low. "You have been living off me for 10 years. I have paid your rent more times than I can count. I have covered your bills. I have bailed you out every time you screwed up. And you have never once thanked me. You have never once asked if I could afford it. You just took and took and took. And when I finally said no, you called me selfish." Andrew opened his mouth to respond, but I kept talking. "Dad took $8,000 from an account I built for my daughter. He did not ask me. He did not tell me until after it was done. He handed me a folder like it was a done deal, like I had no choice, like my money was his to use however he wanted. And you stood there expecting me to just accept it. You both did." My father finally spoke, his voice weak. "Marcus, you have always been there for us. I thought you would understand." I turned to him, my voice cutting. "I did understand. That is why I stopped it." Andrew stepped back, his voice shaking now. "So what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him, my face blank. "I do not know, and I do not care. Figure it out the way I have been figuring it out my entire life, without help." My mother finally spoke, her voice thin and broken. "Marcus, please. He is your brother." I turned to her, my voice softer but no less firm. "And Sophie is my daughter, and she needed that money more than he did." I walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob, and looked back at my father one last time. "If you ever touch my accounts again, I will not just reverse the transfer, I will press charges." I walked out. I got into my car. I drove away. Behind me, the lights of my father's house flickered in my rearview mirror. I did not look back. 3 weeks passed. I did not hear from my father. I did not hear from Andrew. My mother called once, left a voicemail asking me to reconsider, asking me to help Andrew one more time. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. I blocked their numbers. I removed them from my social media. I made it clear that the door I had walked out of that night was closed permanently. The bank completed their investigation. The $8,000 was returned to my hospital fund in full. I received a formal letter confirming that my father's access had been permanently revoked and that additional security measures had been implemented to prevent future unauthorized transactions. I filed the letter away and moved on. Sophie's surgery was scheduled for 4 months from now. The fund was intact. The doctors were optimistic. My ex-wife and I had coordinated everything, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something right. I was protecting my daughter. I was prioritizing the person who actually mattered. I was drawing boundaries that should have existed a decade ago. I heard through a mutual cousin that Andrew had moved. He found a cheaper apartment farther from downtown, something he could actually afford on his own income. The cousin said Andrew was angry, that he blamed me for everything, that he told people I had abandoned him when he needed me most. I did not respond. I did not defend myself. I just let him say whatever he needed to say. His version of the story did not change the facts. He had been living off me for years and I had finally stopped funding it. That was the truth, whether he accepted it or not. My father never apologized. My mother sent one more text weeks after the confrontation, saying she hoped I would come back when I was ready. I did not reply. I was not angry anymore. I was not hurt anymore. I was just done. Done pretending that being dependable meant being disposable. Done pretending that family meant giving until there was nothing left. Done pretending that my silence meant permission. I stood on my balcony one evening, weeks after everything had ended, looking out at the city lights. The air was cool. The street below was quiet. I thought about the folder my father had handed me, about the casual way he had explained taking my daughter's money. I thought about Andrew showing up that night, furious and desperate, demanding that I fix his problems one more time. I thought about my mother's voicemail, asking me to reconsider, asking me to help, asking me to be the person I had always been. But I was not that person anymore. I had stopped being that person the moment I walked out of my father's house. I had stopped being the dependable son, the invisible provider, the family ATM. I had become something else, someone who protected the people who mattered, someone who said no, someone who walked away when the cost was too high. I thought about Sophie. I thought about the surgery she would have, the recovery she would go through, the life she would live because I had fought for her. I thought about the $8,000 sitting safely in an account no one could touch. I thought about the boundaries I had drawn, the lines I had enforced, the peace I had claimed. I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because I had won, but because I was free. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free from the cycle of exploitation. Free from the belief that family meant sacrifice without limit. I was free, and that was enough. I turned and walked back inside. The door closed behind me. The lights of the city faded into the background. I sat down on my couch, opened my laptop, and checked Sophie's surgery fund one more time. The number was exactly where it needed to be. I closed the laptop. I leaned back. I breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could.